investing in property makes sense. Investing in the right property takes knowledge. Welcome to the Rewarding Property Decisions podcast. I'm Jarrod McCabe, Director of Wakeland Property Advisory. Join me for expert insights into the fundamentals, trends and opportunities to help you create long-term wealth through smart property decisions. Hi everyone, and welcome to episode 78 of the Rewarding Property Decisions podcast. So for a long time, Melbourne's obviously been considered one of the most livable cities, well, not only in Australia, but certainly within the world. And there are obviously many reasons for that. Obviously, we've got a fantastic cafe culture. The parklands, obviously being formerly known as the Garden State, there's a reason for that. Fantastic quality of housing and a variety of housing too. There's a lot of period style homes, but also modern architecture as well. Education in Victoria and Melbourne particularly is very good. We've got really good public transport linkages. Some would argue perhaps the climate isn't ideal, but certainly different times of the year. We love the different weather you get and the different seasons you get in Melbourne. And obviously the list goes on. So there are any number of reasons why Melbourne is very, very popular. But for residents, it can actually get even more personal than that. And it can be quite intimate in terms of the reasons why they love their city, or more specifically, their suburb. And sometimes it's not until you actually get to live in those areas that you get to know the intimate details and perhaps some of the secrets that they have. Now, I'm not talking about the key attributes or the things that might drag external people into suburbs. So things like, we're not talking about Edinburgh Gardens in North Fitzroy or Albert Park Lake or even Lygon Street with its fantastic restaurants and cafes and things that it offers to those people, to diners in that area. I'm more talking about things that only the locals will know about. So really intimate things that it might be a really good cafe that's hard to find, and we'll certainly look at a couple of those, a park or some amazing walking tracks that are really difficult to know about unless you're doing it on a daily basis. So I thought I'd go through a few of these things today and see what we can come up with. And it's certainly suburbs that we frequent on a regular basis, and areas that we know really well. So things that we've looked at, suburbs that draw us and why they draw us in. But what I would also really like is for listeners to send us some emails, get in touch to let us know some of the secrets that you've got and some of the things that you really like about the suburbs that you reside in, and things that have drawn you there in the past, and perhaps things that other people may not know about. So we can perhaps do a review podcast topic in a month or two's time to go over feedback that we've received from you. But let's start off with probably a new one, a fairly unique one, and it's something that I came across a few years ago when I purchased a property for some clients in Northcote, in Leonard Street, Northcote, and there's a small little reserve that's tucked away between Leonard Street and Stanley Street, and it's accessed via an old laneway from Leonard Street. It's got very, very limited street frontage. It's only the laneway and a slightly larger space fronting onto Stanley. It's very quiet. It's tucked away behind all of the residential properties in the area. So unless you're a local family or a local resident, you really aren't going to know about this. And I certainly didn't prior to buying this property. It's got a little grassed area, but it's also got a really nice little playground that residents use. And from speaking to residents around COVID, it was certainly a really good draw card to bring the community together. So this is Macadam Reserve, if I hadn't mentioned that. Macadam Reserve tucked between these two locations. So really only residents of, say, Thompson Street, Stanley and Leonard are likely to use this little reserve. But it is really intimate, and I found it really, really fascinating. But I can absolutely see why local residents would love this little park. Another one that I've probably, it's become a favourite of mine in recent times, and it's only a new business that's just started up, but I'll quite often visit it on a Saturday in between appointments, particularly if I'm out in the northern suburbs. So what this is known as Nonna's House, and it's an old 1960s brown brick house fronting onto Nicholson Street. So it's 550 Nicholson Street is the address, and it's on the corner of Brooks Crescent. It's formerly owned by a gentleman by the name of Hamish Vicari's grandparents. Now Hamish, he now lives in the property, and to honour them, his nonna passed away in 2022. To honour them, he and his nonna, they've created a sub cafe in the backyard in their old garage at the rear. It's fascinating, and if you don't know it's there, it's really hard to come by. So you come off Brooks Crescent and there's a little red gate that you access off Brooks Crescent. You go into this tiny little concrete paved courtyard, and there's a little bar, or not a bar, but a servery with the subs being, or the sandwiches being made in the background, and it's all very, very authentic Italian. So there's a lot of meatball subs and Parmesan subs. It's fantastic. The food is really, really good quality, and it's very, very authentic. I loved going there, and there's a little park just outside, so you can, if it's a nice day, I take mine out, sit in the park, have something to eat, and then you can move on. But he's certainly, Hamish has taken this on to honour his grandparents, and you walk in and it is like stepping back in a time capsule. There's a lemon tree in the backyard, it's all concrete paved. They've got a nice couple of picnic tables, so if you want to sit in there. But unless you know where it is, it's quite hard to come by. So something very much worth checking out. Next one is, this is a little bit more exclusive, and to know about it, you actually need to be a resident of East Melbourne. And this one came to me through a former colleague of mine who does reside in East Melbourne. And what it is, if you go into a ballot, and if you are a resident of East Melbourne, you can get your own little plot of Fitzroy Gardens and create your own veggie patch. So Melbourne City Council have got a number of these around, but I think this one's probably the most engaging in the fact that to be able to have your own little plot in East Melbourne, particularly with a lot of apartments in East Melbourne, an apartment residence, you can go into East Melbourne and set up your own little veggie patch, go and tend to it however many times you want, maintain it, and just have your own little quiet spot to go and sit right in the middle of Melbourne, and one of Melbourne's most iconic garden precincts, right on the fringe of the CBD, and you can go in there and make your tomatoes and your zucchinis or whatever else you would like to grow. I just think it's a fantastic and really unique opportunity for residents of East Melbourne. The next one I've got is probably a little bit of bias here, a local bias. It's one of our local businesses close to our office in East Kew, and it's something that we as a business frequent on a fairly regular basis. And I'd probably have to say it's one of the smallest cafes in the eastern suburbs. It's Briquette's Cafe. It's formerly a power transformer, and in later years it was the office for a firewood and briquette yard. So it's a tiny little brick building on the corner of Harp Junction. Make fantastic coffees and pastries, have fantastic pastries as well. It's very, very popular with locals, and also many of those that are doing their morning walk, run or bike ride along what is another, not so much secret, but the Anniversary Trail, which for Burundara residents is very, very popular. And it's a old steam era outer circle line. So the old steam train used to run through it. It's been converted now to a bike track, and it runs from the Yarra River Trail near the Eastern Freeway around Fairfield, and it runs right through to Gardeners Creek Trail. So, but that leads on to Briquettes. So there's a lot of people that are using that foot traffic, and Briquettes gets some great business out of that too. But it is very small, and you can see it if you're not a local, because there's quite often a lineup of people out the door opposite the Harp Hotel. But it is a very, very small little cafe, but fantastic coffee, fantastic pastries. Now, one thing that I would have to say with Melbourne, coming back to my quip earlier about the weather and the climate, we're not really probably known like some of the other capital cities around Australia for our beaches. Now, I get laughed at a few times by some of my compatriots in other cities, but to be fair to say that the beaches in Melbourne aren't the greatest. We don't have Bondi, we don't have Cottesloe. And if you do want to be a surfer, it's a reasonable trip. We've got some great surf beaches down on the surf coast at Bells, Winky Pop, those sorts of places. Or you can go down to Phillip Island, and there's some great spots there too. However, I am told, and I can't say this one with experience, but I am told if the wind is right and the swell is right, and you're very, very fortunate, that there is a nice little gentle beach break down at Brighton Beach. And it's really good for learners and great to get your feet wet and try and get up and learn before you start taking on the bigger swells down on the surf coast. It can be very picturesque down there. If you've got surfers going out, you've got the Brighton Beach boxes, and then you can obviously got the CBD in the background. So to be able to say that there is it's got to be perfect and it's got to be right, but there is a beach break at Brighton Beach that can be maximised and utilised when everything is right. So it's something worth keeping an eye out for. I can't say to you, well, if the wind's doing this or the swell's doing that, you'll need to have a bit more knowledge than what I do. But I think that's something to keep an eye out for if you are wanting to learn to surf and don't want to have to traipse all the way down to the coast to do that. Another one from an outdoor activities perspective is very popular around Melbourne is fishing. Any weekend, you go down to any of the piers around Melbourne and you'll see that there's a lot of fishermen that get out and enjoy catching whatever's around at that time of the year. But one of the spots that I wasn't aware of and have been informed about by, again, one of my colleagues in the office is what's known as the Warmies or the Hotties, which is in Newport. Now, this is right near the local Newport power station, and that's why it's known by those terms. What happens is it flushes, the power station flushes warm water directly out into the inlet, which heats up the water temperatures in the area. And when this happens, it actually attracts some really good size and good numbered fish to the area. And it's forms like tailor, snapper, flathead, salmon, those sorts of fish. And it's not uncommon to see rows and rows of fishermen lined up when the power station's running. I'm told they are considered safe to eat, but generally it's probably recommended to do the catch and release approach. But certainly something from an angler's perspective to check out if you're in the Newport area. And finally, again, another one that we've got probably a little bit of bias towards, tucked between Kew and the Eastern Freeway, is Hayes Paddock. Now, it's probably not as much of a secret, but a lot of people do love it. It includes Melbourne's very first All Abilities playground, it's a fantastic playground to utilise. It's great for young, old, disabled or able-bodied kids. And it's fantastic, got some fantastic running tracks, ovals and treed spaces as well. It's really easily accessible and it's got some great parkland. So you could go back up to Briquettes, pick yourself up a coffee, come down to the park and make the most of the open space that Hayes Paddock certainly offers. So that's about it. As I said, I would really love it if some of our listeners could send through some of their ideas and some of their secrets of the suburbs that they've resided in the past or that they currently reside in. We've also sent out a couple of times recently that we're going to be doing another Q&O podcast in the coming weeks. So again, if you've got some questions that you'd like answered, comments that you'd like our thoughts on, please send those through and we're more than happy to address those going forward. So that's it for today's episode. Thanks very much for joining me for episode 78 of the Rewarding Property Decisions podcast. Please share the podcast far and wide with all friends, family and colleagues. And if you would like further information on making rewarding property decisions, please visit our website, wakeland.com.au.